Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So my name is Mia Palanca, and thank you to all that are here and are joining our session for this morning. So welcome to this free webinar from VBusiness and AWS called Accelerate Your Fully Managed File Migration Journey with VBusiness and AWS. So today we're going to be joined by 4 speakers. One is Mr. Paul Haverfield. He's the Principal Storage Specialist for AWS in the Asia Pacific region and Japan, as well as Kumar Nachikata, Partner Solutions Architect from AWS Asia Pacific and Japan as well. And then Ms. Lily Jiang, who is the Storage and GTM Specialist from also AWS Asia Pacific and Japan. And from VBusiness, we are joined by Mr. Lowell Lazatin, who is the Business Development Officer for VBusiness. All right, so, we have a really packed and educational session planned for you. So sit back, relax, and I hope everyone has had their breakfast already, has had their coffee, because this is going to be an interesting morning for everyone. Okay, so before we begin, before I turn over the floor to our first speaker, let me just walk you through the GoToWebinar tool very quickly. So if you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar tool, there are a few functions that you can do so that we can make the session a little bit more interactive. If you're using your mobile phone, so depending on the device that you're using, if you're using your mobile phone, you can ask us a question and we'll be able to see it in real time. At the bottom of your mobile phone's screen, you'll see a question mark button, and you can type your question in there and we'll be able to see it. And if you're using your desktop or your laptop, you can ask the staff a question as well. And you have another option. So if your question is a little too complicated, or you want to explain the context or the background of your question, it might be long, you can also opt to raise your hand. So if you raise your hand, we will unmute you during the open chat and the Q&A portion. Okay. So also, I want to let everyone know that we want to give prizes for our session today. So during the Q&A portion and the open chats in between the session, so when you see the words open chat on your screen, the first asker of a question will get a free grab voucher care of VBusiness and AWS. Okay. So now I will turn over the floor to Mr. Paul Haverfield, who will be our first speaker for today. So Paul, are you there?
Yes. Hello, Mia, and
hi.
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
All right. So let me just give presenter mode quickly to Miss.
And yes, Mia, I've had my breakfast and I've had my coffee, and I've also been to the gym as well to maintain that exercise while we're working from home.
All right, that's great. So productive morning for everyone. All right, so I will give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Mia, and good morning and welcome to the just approaching 50 people almost that have joined us this morning. I'd like to thank you very much for giving us some of your very precious time to enable us to sort of share some introductory overview and a little bit deeper dive information into some of the storage services that we have available at AWS. Now, just before we get going, I've just joined AWS recently, and I'm a relatively newbie myself to to cloud infrastructure and to cloud storage. And I'll be sharing with you what I know and what I've learned so far in my time at AWS. But before I get into that, I'd like to sort of get to know you, our audience, just a little better, to help us sort of customize how deep we go in some areas or what we focus on in our demonstrations. So Mia, if you could please launch our first poll question, so
Yes,
as we can
okay.
just we can ask our audience this morning just a little bit. We have 3 questions that we'd like to cover before we get started into our content proper. Now you should see a poll pop up in your window. So what best explains your current job role? Is it business? Is it technical? Business decision maker, like are you a very important person or a super important person, everybody's important, or something else? And let me see, we have a little timer here somewhere, I believe, but if you could answer that question, just to help us gain a little bit of feedback about yourselves, to get to know our audience, get to know who's listening this morning on this webinar. So let me see, so far we have mostly technical people. We have about 50% technical, roughly 23% sales, marketing, business, and about 17% others. So nice balance there, but mostly a good technical audience, and that's great. That's great to see. I'm a technologist at heart myself. I love to talk about technology and help people understand how technology can make life better for themselves and their organizations. Okay, so I think we could move on to that next question now. Question number 2, Mia. Okay, so we'd like to know, are you using any public cloud services today from any cloud provider? It might be us, AWS, might be a local company that is very local to you in your city, in your country, or maybe one of the other global providers. So are you using any cloud infrastructure? And it looks like we have an overwhelming majority of yes, about 70% roughly yes, and roughly 20, it's increasing, 75% yes, roughly 25% no. So we do have some newbies, some greenhorns, as we'd like to call, perhaps the people that are not yet exposed to cloud. Okay, that's stabilized at around 70% yes, 30% no. Okay, so just one more question, one more poll question before we get started proper for us to help. So we've got a good technical audience who has some experience with the cloud. And lastly, what motivated you to join the session today? Do you have an active file migration project perhaps that you're working on? You're exploring the options of file migration. You're just here to learn and be curious, which is fantastic. We love to support people that want to learn and be curious. Or is there some other reason? So we've got some good answers coming in now. Let me see, we're going roughly 10%, some active projects going on, 30% exploring, and maybe 60% personal interest and learning. So that's fantastic. You know, people, in my experience in my career, people that invest in themselves are typically the ones that get ahead in their career, in their teams. You're able to differentiate yourselves by learning and being curious and you know, spending time, allocating time, not just to go to the gym in the mornings, but also to, you know, invest in yourself in your mental capacity to continue learning. Okay, so our answers have balanced out here quite well. roughly a bit under 10% some active projects, about a third exploring the option of file migration into the cloud, and a little bit under 60% some personal interest in learning. Okay, so thank you very much for those 3 questions. We will come back and have another 2 questions a little bit later on. So on the topic of questions, we would love to hear from you. We do have sort of 4 speakers that are lined up this morning, but we would also love to hear from yourself. So to do that, you have the ability to ask questions through the GoToMeeting tool, as Mia showed you a little bit earlier on. So please, as each of us speakers is sharing our content and our wisdom with you, feel free to drop any questions into that question manager within your GoToMeeting control panel. And you just have to expand where you see that little triangle arrow next to the questions item, expand that, drop a question in, and we have multiple opportunities for those questions to be answered live. And we also have the opportunity, if you're comfortable, to invite you to come on to speak as well. Just a little bit of incentive, we do have some gift cards to give away. I believe they could be grab vouchers, I think. Grab vouchers are quite universal across this region of Asia. So, you know, do ask those questions. If you ask some good questions, you could well be rewarded with some grab gift vouchers. Okay, so Lily, if we could move on to my opening slides, thank you. I'm going to kick us off this morning by giving you an introduction to AWS's storage services at a very high level. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I just joined AWS myself a few months ago, and I joined from traditional vendor land, those traditional name brand vendors that I'm sure everybody this morning is very well conversed with. And through my time and my career out in customer land, in traditional vendor land, as well as now at Amazon Web Services, one thing in common is that customers, just exactly like our audience on the call this morning, are always looking at ways to solve problems using innovative technologies, new technologies, how to differentiate your services, your applications, what you go to market to serve your customers with. That's from a modernizing point of view. Looking at optimizing, you know, optimizing is something that is always in all of our lives, whether it's at home, in our homes, in our apartments, optimizing our space utilization. You know, I live in a relatively small apartment here in Singapore, and I'm constantly looking at ways how I can optimize the space that I have, because that space is fixed, it doesn't change. I have to optimize and use that space I have available to the best possible method that I can to get the most out of it. Sometimes I look at moving things out, rehosting them, getting rid of them, lifting and shifting stuff that I no longer need and passing it on, or just recycling it. And it's the same within our businesses. A lot of customers, in fact, 9 out of 10 customers today that I talk to, are all looking at how can they rehost, how can they find a better way of running an existing application in a more optimal, more innovative way that they can transform and help their customers into the future. So let's move on to the next slide and just have a look at what's enabling this to happen. Now, cloud infrastructure is undoubtedly a platform that allows you to innovate and trial and experiment very, very, very cost effectively. And I'd encourage all of you that have yet to experience public cloud, go and get an AWS account after this webinar. It's free. You can start to play and experiment with the services that we're talking about this morning for no charge on our AWS free tier. What I'd like you to really think about as we go through this webinar this morning is the fact that cloud journeys start with very small projects. And a lot of those very small projects that many customers start their cloud journey on can be a storage project. In fact, storage use cases make the most sense to start your cloud journey. Just like at AWS itself, back in March 14, 2006, Pi Day 2006, AWS was launched with its own storage project, the Simple Storage Service, or now very famously known as Amazon S3. So Amazon S3 launched AWS. Storage services can also launch you into your cloud journey with a very small project that we'll have a look at now on this next slide. It's no exaggeration at all that storage use cases, storage-centric projects are the safest, easiest on-ramp projects for you to get exposure and experience with the public cloud infrastructure. So if we have a look at this slide from left to right, backup and restore. Backup, restore, data protection. Of course, in this day and age, unfortunately, the most common trigger sometimes for customers to look at their backup, restore, disaster recovery is ransomware. Ransomware, if you're not thinking about how to protect, how to recover, are you protected from ransomware? Unfortunately, the odds are that one day you will find out in the heat of the moment. So backup and restore projects are amongst the most common use cases that many customers first get their experience to public cloud. They move on then to some archiving, some compliance, just storing data files in like a parking lot, a cloud parking lot, where you have to keep files and you have to keep records, but you really want to keep them in that most space effective, space optimized, cost optimized manner. What we see then is when customers get more confidence with cloud technology, they move on to things like that traditional personal home directory, home file share, or group or corporate file shares, repositories for people to collaborate and share files. And that confidence builds as you go along that journey in sophistication and value into use cases like data lakes, modern apps, application modernization, and then increasingly into absolute business critical applications that underpin the foundation of your business. If we move on to our next slide, we'll start just to have a look very quickly at the storage services or the storage protocols that AWS provides that underpin that foundation of all of your applications within the cloud. Now, my entire working career, which is so far, I think is something like 37 years of exposure in the IT industry, I've always worked in storage. And storage for me is the absolute foundation of the IT stack. You know, there's nothing else underneath storage for you to go. Storage is at the bottom, it's the most important. It's like the foundations for your home, for your condominium, for your apartment block. If those foundations aren't solid, what's on top of it is going to come crumbling down at some point. So AWS's storage portfolio is designed to support that solid foundation of any cloud application, whether it's the more modern object storage, S3, whether it's traditional block storage known as our elastic block store, and whether it's the file storage semantics that we're going to talk about today in a little bit more detail. We're going to have a look at today our Amazon EFS as well as Amazon EFSX for Windows File Server. So let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. As well as having the storage protocols as the foundation for your applications, we also have the ability for you to move data currently from your on-premise data center into the cloud. You know, one thing that all of you, roughly 50% of the technical audience this morning, will appreciate and know is that data is heavy. Data has gravity. It's difficult to move. It's sticky. It doesn't want to move. It wants to just rest where it's currently resting. So that's why Amazon has developed a very, very rich tool set of tools, methodologies to help you move data either in an online, non-disruptive manner or in an offline, sort of more disruptive manner, depending on the use case, depending on the quantum of data. We have tools, technologies, as well as methodologies to help you move data with any use case, any size that you can imagine possible, to allow you to get that data into the cloud to start that innovation sooner rather than later. So if we move on to the next slide, I just want to sort of start to wrap up this first section with a little bit of a message around understanding your costs. There's no doubt whatsoever that many customers are interested and attracted to public cloud with the belief of lowering costs. And you absolutely can do that. There's no doubt about that, that you can do that. But what you really need to do first is you need to take a bit of a step back and you need to understand, what does your cost profile look today on premises? One thing I know for a fact, being attached to the on-premise world for like 34 of my 35 years or so that I've worked, the costs are not very transparent. The costs associated with on-premise migration, with underutilization, the human costs, the data center costs, the networking costs, they're very, very difficult to assemble in a very simple, transparent, like bill of materials or cost manifest. One aspect of the public cloud is that it does make costs very transparent and very easy to identify. So one step to take to look at, think about, understand your current costs before looking at that first cloud project. So if we have a look at this, the next slide, we'll just wrap up here with a very high level summary that shows the different technologies, storage services that AWS offers to host, to run, to support your application, your data lake, your DR solution in the public cloud. And depending on where you're at in your journey, whether it's simple re-platforming or re-hosting, or down the track re-architecting and doing some more heavy lifting in your application technology, we have a storage service and we have an option for you to support your application, whether it's in-house developed, whether it's a off-the-shelf commercial piece of software. We have the support that you need to host and run that application within our public cloud infrastructure. Looking at our next slide here, I can guarantee that every one of the customers on our audience this morning will identify with at least 2 or 3 of the logos that you can see on this slide of very famous global customers that are using and innovating and optimizing along with AWS storage. I'd just like to focus on one of those customers on our next slide, which is quite a famous financial services company in this part of the world called Wise, or formerly known as Transferwise. I love Transferwise. Being an Aussie working in Singapore, I use Transferwise every month to send some money back to Australia to pay off my home loans and so on in Australia. And I love the fact that Transferwise at the time, they started their journey in the cloud with backups. A very simple backup data protection use case. Transferwise started their journey with AWS many years ago. At the time when they started that journey, they were running their infrastructure in their own data center, and they then moved on and developed to re-platform, to re-host and re-architect their entire application stack to the point today that they're virtually all in running on AWS. So we'd also love to see your logos on one of those slides and share your use case as well with our other customers. So if we just move to the next slide there, and I'll invite Lily to join me. Let's just check, Lily, do we have any questions so far? Has anybody been brave enough, or does anybody have anything on their mind that they've asked?
Yes, actually, we do have a couple of questions coming in. So the first question that I'm seeing here is, how do we ensure that data stored on the cloud can be retrieved without problems after several years? And I think we can tackle one by one. And I'd actually like to also invite Kumar on the call. I'm not sure if the webcam is working for you at the moment, Kumar. But,
it's not, but I can support with my voice. I think I'm
yeah,
loud and
absolutely.
audible.
Yep, very clear.
Yep, we can hear you, Kumar. Very good, very clearly. Okay, so I think the heart of that question is like, how can I be satisfied and gain the confidence that any data that I have stored in the public cloud is going to persist and remain and be available when I need it? Is that correct, Lily? Does that get
Yep, so I think the aspects that's being asked over here is, once we store the data, the protection aspect of it in terms of security, and then also retrieval. So how does the customer assure that the retrieved data will be the exact one that they've stored, and how they can access it at the point of time they want?
Okay, so I guess there's a couple of ways, there's a couple of aspects to that answer. Just first and very quickly, from a security and a protection point of view, AWS has many levels of certification, auditing, which are all available publicly at our Amazon AWS website for you to look at the different auditing reports and certification reports and various government policies that we comply with. From a point of view of, can I read my data back at some point in the future when I need to? On that point, really, cloud storage is no different to your on-premise storage in that respect. Your application would have abilities to verify, to look at its data, make sure it's available. And running that application in the cloud, you still have that same ability to be able to retrieve and verify and validate your data to make sure it's still there. So I really see that more as an application layer function and feature that wouldn't change if that application is in a private data center or in a public cloud infrastructure. Kumar, do you have anything to add to that answer?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you covered it quite well, Paul. I would like to mention one more aspect. So on-premises storage or any storage media, we talk about durability, right? That's something which kind of give you comfort that how durable or how safe your data will be on storage media. For each of our storage service, and as we explain the file storage service and some of the service which Paul has mentioned, we have some level of durability. So for example, S3 has 11 nines of durability. What that means is it's the data, any object or any file which we are writing here in S3 is cascaded across 3 or more availability zone. Which, just to put in perspective, if you are doing it in your data center, most of the time people write it in 2 media, or maybe 3 or 4 different media. So it's way more durable in AWS by default. That's one. And second is, so there are some risk to your data, for example, accidental deletion, maybe internal threat or something like that. So that comes under protecting your data with some of the backup mechanism or some of the security mechanism which Paul has mentioned. But for sure, with my experience as well, on-premises versus cloud, it's highly durable compared to on-premises, and also the kind of tools and capability you have in terms of protecting your data, it ensures that you have different ways of protecting. And finally, accessing data there are industry standard protocol, for example, POSIX protocol, or for S3 REST API. So all of that is available for a customer to access that data efficiently.
Thanks, Kumar.
Great.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Kumar. Okay, Lily, is it time to hand over to yourself for our feature topic of this morning?
Sorry, Kumar, were you saying something?
Yeah. Did we want to just give a quick glance of AWS Console and all the storage services which we talked? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, over to you, Kumar, to do that bit of a walkthrough.
Yeah, just if I can get the presenter. Yeah, let me share the right screen. I guess this is the right screen. Okay, Paul or Lily, give me a go that you can see my AWS console.
Yep, we can see the console.
Good to go.
Okay, first of all, Paul, thank you so much to give a very good insight and sharing your experience. Now, good morning, everyone. So as we know that we will be focusing more on file storage today, but consider this as a quick tour of AWS console and different storage service console. I know we have majority of the technical people in the audience, but we have mixed crowd. So for some of you, it might be familiar, and for some of you, it might be very new, but you'll be able to get it. So in order to interact with AWS, configure storages, there are a couple of ways you can do it. In fact, not just for storage, for every service in AWS, you can use command line interface. We call it AWS CLI, or you can use different SDKs, and it's available in different programming languages. But if you're starting with AWS, then the console is the best thing to start with. So this is my AWS console. Paul was saying that you can open an AWS account with a credit card, and you will have some free tier in every service which you can use. So I've already logged in. One thing to point out is the region. So when you log into AWS console, you can choose a specific region. And for me, I have chosen Singapore region because that seems the most relevant region for this, for Philippines and for the area we are living in. But now let's look at the services, all the services in AWS. So there are two ways you can look at all the AWS services. One, I can simply click here on my top left, and you see all the services, whether it's in compute, machine learning, storage, database, and so on. But what I would do is there's one more way to look at all the services. I can just click on here and look at all the services. And because our focus is the storage today, and even in storage, file storage, let's have a quick glance on each of the console. I've already opened each of the consoles. So this is our object storage S3. As Paul mentioned, this is for modern application. Call it Swiss Army knife. So you can use it for backup and restore, archive. It's a core of data lake, and many, many innovative serverless use cases with S3. So I am always excited about S3. This is highly, highly durable, 11 nines durable, we call it. As I was mentioning, this is when every object is cascaded across 3 or more availability zone. The next is EFS, where we will dive deep in today's discussion as well. So EFS is for modern application like container, and again, serverless as well. But essentially, it's a Linux-based file system, so it exposes its file system via NFS 4.1, and we'll get into more detail. Then we have more services in file, FSX. These are industry standard popular file system, which is fully managed by AWS. Today we have Windows File Server and Lustre. We are going to focus on Windows File Server today, so you'll see more details. Then we have Glacier. I would say that if you are planning to use object storage today and you have archival requirement, you don't need to use this API directly. You can actually use S3 API to reach to Glacier. So just consider that if you are planning to use object storage and you have archival requirement today, this may not be needed for today. Now, we have AWS Storage Gateway. So Storage Gateway is for the use cases where your application does want to use object storage, but it does not have capability to reach to storage via API. For, as you know, S3 can be reached via REST API, right? But let's say your application only understands the POSIX compliant, like let's say NFS or SMB. That's where you would use Storage Gateway. So we have different kind of gateways, file gateway for file protocols, volume gateway to use S3 as a volume via iSCSI protocol, or tape library where you use this as VTL in the front end, but at the back end the data is stored in S3. We have also launched recently FSX file system gateway that is a little different. Probably we'll dive deep once we are getting into FSX for Windows File Server. Last but not the least, AWS Backup, which is more for, we were talking about protecting your data, which is super important in AWS. So all your AWS workload, how do you protect those? These are supported services today, EBS, EC2, RES, DynamoDB, and so on. But this is the centralized one location which can be used to protect all your data through policy, which is super helpful because 2-3 years back, you had to do it separately for each service. And now we have that centralized tool. Now, before I give this back to Lily, I may want to ask you one thing, and I won't have ability to see your answer, but we missed one thing in this storage service, right? Paul mentioned block storage, file storage, and object storage, right? We don't see block storage here. That's because that's part of compute. I mean, when you launch an EC2 instance, you can attach a block storage. We call it EBS, so that's where it is. We would also talk about a few migration service, not few, one very specific service, data sync today. But overall, to migrate different workloads in AWS, we have number of migration services. So I know I was fast, but this was a very quick glimpse on, very quick tour of all the storage services and AWS Console in general. Next, let's get into FSX for Windows File Server, and I'll come back and demonstrate. I'll create a file system and I'll show different options, so it'll reinforce all the learning which you had with Lily. Back to you, Lily.
Thank you, Kumar. Yep, I'll just take over the screen again to start the section around Amazon FSX for Windows File Server. Let me know if you can see.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Awesome. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Lily, and I'm the storage GTM specialist based out of the Singapore office of AWS. Before we start, I would just like to get to know a little bit more about how you are using AWS at the moment. So one poll I would like to run is, first of all, if your company is using AWS today. So we have a couple options of if you are having a project in testing phase, or if you're running in a production workload on AWS, or if you're currently exploring the opportunity. And hopefully this session helps you understand a little bit better about some of the questions that you have. Especially, I see a lot of questions around the hybrid cloud solutions, as well as about data protection. We'll have another open chat after this section to understand if there's if some of the questions that you've had were already answered, and then we will also have an open conversation about your inquiries. So currently I'm seeing the how actively you're using it. We'll just give a couple more minutes for you to tick the box of where your AWS account applies, and then, well, I'm already seeing a very good balance actually. Okay, it's quite interesting because in the previous polls, we've had about half of us in the technical roles. We also, more than half of us in the technical role, and we had about half of us in the company already using AWS in production stage. When it comes to having the AWS account and using it personally, we have 1/3 of each. So it has to go to your see if your free tier has expired, and then we have 1/3 that you don't have an AWS account. So I think it's a great opportunity to check out the demos from Kumar, and also see if you'd like to deploy some of the file services today on your own management console. Awesome, thank you, Mia. All right, so thank you for your answers. It really helps us understand what kind of content you might be looking for. So before I dive deep into FSX for Windows File Server as a service itself, I just want to have a bit of a recap of file storage file services. As you know, files are everywhere, and what that means is it's predominant as well as it's rapidly growing. So essentially, file-based storage in a nutshell is used to organize and store the data for multiple users accessing and sharing the same data, right? And in that case, a lot of the data is unstructured. So the form can be in Office documents, media files, engineering files. We have a lot of customers when it comes to software applications for HR or tax, because invoices and payrolls, all of that, they are file storage. Now, this data we also see from M&E companies, so media processing environments, as well as content repositories, and of course archival data for compliance reasons for FSIs, and again in media or healthcare, life science. So we really see file storage service used in multiple verticals as well as different size of companies, and oftentimes the data will be spread across multiple storage silos in different locations. So typically you will need to provision the shared storage on-prem or have it in the cloud, where we will talk about the particular service of Amazon FSX. Now, if we dive into some of the challenges that we have been seeing from customers when they manage the on-prem storage, well, first of all, obviously, is the cost and the provisioning aspect. Like Paul mentioned at the very beginning of the cost structure, it's not very clear, it's not very transparent of how much you're actually spending on the storage. You also need to provision how much storage you need, the types, the mix of the SSD and HDD, and also there's the additional cost of software, backup, etc. And in addition to that, there's obviously the warranty renewals, and then you have the physical considerations. So you have to think about the power and the cooling and space. All of that becomes a very vague TCO calculation. But another thing that we are seeing as a concern from customers is the scalability aspect and of course the data protection. So paying if customers want to scale, they need to pay for more trays and racks and rooms and data centers. And this, we have been seeing that it takes weeks, if lucky, but more likely will take months. And obviously, there's the ongoing management overhead to make sure that these on-prem storage arrays are kept up to date and continuously accessible. So when we opened this session, the title was about fully managed file service. And what that means is that heavy lifting that you just saw before, that will be taken care of from AWS. So the service I want to talk about for the next 10 to 15 minutes is Amazon FSX for Windows File Server. This service is fully managed, so the heavy lifting that you saw from the previous slide is covered from AWS, and it's built on Windows Server. So that means there are a lot of things that are integrated so that you don't have to re-architect or re-platform when moving to AWS. And we'll get to that in the next couple slides. So these are some of the features and the aspects of Amazon FSX for Windows File Server. And I won't go through all of these aspects because it's quite a lot of information. But a couple of things I want to highlight is, first of all, the accessibility of it. Now, since the pandemic, we are seeing a lot of remote work and distributed work environments, and obviously that comes with a lot of end-user computing environments. Now, with this, we have end-user computing services called Amazon Workspaces and Upstream 2.0, and customers prefer to use Amazon FSX for Windows File Server as their choice of shared storage because they want the sub-millisecond latency and seamless access across hundreds and thousands of users. It's also very compatible, by the way, because FSX supports SMB 2.0 all the way to 3.1.1. Now, changing gears into the performance and scale aspect, if you are familiar with Windows File Server, it supports up to 64 terabytes per file share, but you can see over here that it has petabyte scale of storage scalability, and that is because using DFS namespaces, it can scale up to petabytes, and that exact same logic works for performance as well. So it can scale up to millions of IOPS. Now, the beauty of this is that it also scales with the throughput and storage being independent. So the concerns that customers have when it comes to scalability of having to scale everything at the same time, which obviously results over provisioning, that kind of concerns can be removed. And we'll talk about cost optimization and the actual pricing construct of FSX in the next few slides. But just to tap into this, customers have options. And I think this is one of the biggest advantages of using Cloud File Service, because you can choose if you want to leverage SSD or HDD. And also you can figure out which deployment type you prefer, whether it's using single availability zone or multi-availability zone. Amazon FSX also supports data deduplication and compression, and we have seen that customers actually reduce costs by 30 to 60% through data dedupe. Now, I saw that data protection have been a lot of the questions on the question pane, and while we tap into that a little bit further on the open chat, I want to go through some of the things that are specifically related to Amazon FSX for Windows File Server. Now, as a default, Amazon FSX will have or automatically replicate the file systems for high durability. Now, in addition to that, there are three aspects that you can look into. So first of all is the point-in-time snapshots. Now, the point-in-time snapshots on Windows file system, obviously you can use shadow copies from Windows because, again, Amazon FSX for Windows File Server is built on Windows Server. So you can easily view and restore the individual files or folders from the earlier snapshot that you had. Now, in addition to that, you have the automatic backups. So by default, Amazon FSX supports a daily backup of your file system, and that's on Amazon S3. Now, Kumar before mentioned a little bit about the 11 nines of durability of Amazon S3. So that basically means if you have 1,000 objects to store, it would take 100 million years to lose one object. That's the meaning of 11 nines of durability. So back to the automatic backups, the default retention you can have is for 1 week, and you can configure that up to 90 days, depending on how long you would like to have that data data retention. And in addition to that automatic backup, you can obviously have initiate the backups by yourself. So we also support the user-initiated backups that will not expire. Now, if you remember the management console overview, there was a glimpse of AWS backup as well. So the great thing about Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, as well as the many fully managed services, is that these services talk to one another. So in terms of backup, you can use AWS Backup, which is a unified backup service. So it can help from the creation, the copying, the restore, as well as the deletion of the backup itself. And in addition to that, just a couple things I would like to mention is FSx also speaks with, for example, AWS CloudWatch or CloudTrail. So you can audit the logs, you can monitor the performance, and that makes layers and layers of security on top of what is already a default of the service. I talked a little bit about the convenience of using Amazon FSx because it's built on Windows servers. So things you don't have to change when you're moving to FSx are, for example, the Active Directory. You can bring your Active Directory as well as use the AWS Managed Active Directory if you'd like. And then you can keep your DFS namespaces, DFS names, file shared configuration, storage quotas, so on and so forth. Now, before I move on to the use cases of FSx, I just want to go through some of the customer references that we have over here. So if you see here, one of the interesting customer references that's pretty recent is Samsung Engineering. I think we are all pretty familiar with Samsung. Samsung Engineering chose Amazon FSx for Windows as well as Amazon AppStream 2.0 so that they can stream their EPC design and information management apps. So it's a very typical use case when it comes to user shares and end user computing. By moving to Amazon FSx, they were able to reduce the maintenance cost and the purchasing, logistics, and so forth by 20%. And we've mentioned a little bit about the deployment and the convenience of when you have cloud-native file services. That's exactly what Samsung Engineering experienced. So the speed of deployment moved from months to a few days. Now, in addition to that, I've mentioned a little bit about the end user computing side. So obviously it helped collaborate better with their customers, which in result, it helps them expand to new regions much faster. One other customer reference I found pretty interesting was Expedia Group. And this is also a very recent case study. And I know it's a very challenging time for travel and hospitality business. And I think that's exactly why it was an interesting reference to see throughout the pandemic. So Expedia chose to move to Amazon FSx for Windows File Server because they wanted to reduce their hardware footprint. So they started to consolidate multiple file servers, and they were able to lower the TCO overall. And the interesting part is they were able to increase their durability because they still went for multi-availability zone deployment. So while they were able to reduce that TCO of the power and cooling and the human resources, so on and so forth, they were actually able to increase the durability, which makes the application so much more secure. Just one last customer reference I would like to mention over here is Eduvation, and it's not as well known of a company, but I found it the case study very interesting because Eduvation is an education software company in Korea, and their IT managers were facing a lot of operational challenges. So they came to a point where they had a lack of server engineers so that the developers were managing the servers. And they purchased each server whenever the usage was reaching the limit. So they didn't have the time to have a detailed architecture review. They were always on the verge of going through an outage or not being able to to deliver the best experience for their customers. And their developers, their resources were bombarded with admin overhead. So when they were using Move to AWS, they were actually able to build an integrated academy management platform. And Korea is one of the countries that has a lot of private tutoring academies. So not only the educational institutes, but also these private academies, and hundreds and thousands of them were able to use this management platform because they were finally having a seamless, fully managed shared file storage. We'll go through a couple more customer references after these slides, but those three are the ones that I particularly found super interesting because it really resonates with the customer's concerns around data protection, the TCO, and administrative overhead. Now, the three use cases I would summarize of how Amazon FSX for Windows File Server has been helping customers. The first one is, again, user shares, home directories, and end user computing. So if you see over here, you can see that Amazon FSX is accessible through either the VPN or AWS Direct Connect. And again, with the multi-AZ deployments, the snapshots, as well as the automated and user-initiated backups, it gives the security as well as addresses the latency concerns. And also it has the AD integration to make things convenient for customers. The second use case that I like to mention is application data. So if you remember the customer logo slides, there was another customer called Sanis, and they are an Indian HR and taxation platform company. So any of those invoices or payrolls, any documents that they need to save, they were able to have FSX on the back end as a shared file storage for choice. And another example that I would like to mention over here is Infor. So Infor was using a third-party vendor for their shared storage of their multi-tenant application on AWS. Now, they needed to have several applications share the same storage or disk so that they can drive down the costs. But to do so, they had to manually deploy and manage the storage. So that came down to a point where they had to always call that third-party vendor every time they wanted to upgrade the application. And it's not like Infor has one application, they have hundreds and thousands of applications. And that caused another issue of the maintenance windows. So one of the things that I'm personally experiencing is one of the websites I want to go to purchase something is under maintenance since yesterday. So Infor had a similar problem where the maintenance windows were around 6 hours. So they were losing opportunities and experience for customers. So by moving to Amazon FSX, Infor was able to provision storage for each of their applications. And the great thing is they can scale independently. So with this independent scale, and again, I'll mention that automated backups as well as using AWS Backup, they were able to have so much more of a secure and scalable solution, which in the end, if you look into the benefits, the deployment moved from 3 days to minutes, and they were able to increase the performance by 80% while reducing the storage cost by half. So I think this is a very interesting case study when it comes to a mission-critical applications, how they benefit both from a cost and performance aspect by using cloud-native file storage. Now, one last use case we are seeing increasingly is for Windows SQL Server customers. So I won't go through too much detail, but SQL Server provides 2 deployment options of its always-on solution. So if a customer wants high availability, they can use either always-on failover cluster instances or availability groups. Now, because they are quite of a handful, I'll just refer them to FCI and AG. Now, there are a couple of reasons why FCI might be a little bit more preferred over AG. And the key reasons is, first of all, the licensing cost. So if the customer, unless they really have to use Enterprise Edition license, they can switch to Standard Edition, which is typically about half of the cost of the Enterprise Edition. And FCI supports the Standard SQL Edition. The other aspect is that FCI supports instance level protection, not just the database level. So that said, if there is a scenario where you are using SQL Server Enterprise license, but you, for cost reasons, you want to and can move to Standard Edition while having that high availability of your storage, you can start using Amazon FSX. Another scenario would be if you're using FCI with a self-managed shared storage, or if you're using a third-party storage replication software. Again, you can use Amazon FSX to simplify that SQL FCI deployment. So just to give you a bit of an example of what that means and what that impact is economically, you can look into this comparison between using always on AG versus FCI. And because, again, FCI supports the SQL standard license, you can see that the total cost per month is significantly low. It becomes around half. And while, again, you're still having that high availability through FSX Windows File Server. Now, I want to go through a little bit of the pricing, and then I think that that would open us up for the open chat. So again, FSX, the good thing is that you have the flexibility of the pricing. So again, we support SSD and HDD, and we also support single AZ and multi-AZ. Another thing that Amazon FSX also supports is the data duplication and compression. So officially with the data dedupe, FSX for Windows File Server is officially the lowest cost file storage in the cloud for Windows applications. Again, it is the lowest cost file storage in the world in the cloud for Windows applications. So let's see how that actually works. First of all, if you have the user shares or home directory, so on and so forth, most likely it can have a bit of a data duplication. And we have seen about 30 to 60% can typically go through data dedupe. And based on this, if we think about that example TCO, let's say it's a 10 terabyte storage, and once you've done the data dedupe, you have 50% of that storage actually needing to be stored. And because of high availability, you want the multi-AZ deployment option. And when you consider the storage type, unless it's something very latency sensitive like analytics workload, you can go for the HDD option. And you can see the throughput and backup requirements are on the right side. And based on this, and you can actually calculate this yourself on the AWS pricing calculator, you can see that the total cost of storage and throughput will be about $234 per month. And then including that the backup, it will be $490 per month approximately. And this is based on the Singapore region, and you can always check if you want to use a different region, for example, North Virginia or Oregon, so on and so forth. So that is a very brief summary about what is available and what we commonly see about Amazon FSX for Windows File Server. I know it was pretty fast and it's a ton of information. So if you have any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand or put it on the chat.
Yes, hi Lily. We do you have one? We've got a few questions here that we're waiting to answer. But one question I think here specifically relates to the topic of files in the cloud, and particularly when you have some sort of gateway appliance or perhaps caching appliance in your data center. And the question is, during during working offline, is the file, will the file be synced when back online again? So I think that maybe relates to using FSX file gateway in your data center.
Yeah, so we didn't touch that topic on this section so far, and I'll invite Kumar if he has any comments as well. But recently we launched the FSX File Gateway service. And if you remember the Management Console overview, if you go to Storage Gateway, there is the FSX category as well, and that basically means you can connect to Amazon FSX from your on-prem environment. So if you're familiar with Storage Gateway, now you have that option of either using specifically for FSX, or you can use Volume Gateway and Tape, and also Amazon S3.
Okay, thank you.
Kumar, actually, do you have any?
Yeah, and that's right. For the file sync option, yes, many customers have asked us before that they would like to use FSX for Windows File Server from the remote location or an on-premises location. So up until now, we had to use the cloud version, but now we have the gateway. I have sent a link as well in my answer. But basically, it means that you have some, the latency is decreased, and also it will work as a cache for the file access locally. There is one question which I think I will just tackle it here instead of, the question is about improving the speed of transferring files from S3. And I would love to cover that, but that's a bigger topic. It depends on several, there are several aspects which can impact your performance. First, how much data, what's the total number of objects, prefix configuration, and things like that. So depending on that, we try to parallelize the transfer, and there are tools for that. Sometimes you just use S3 Sync or S3 CP, or sometime you might want to use single zone replication. So depending on the profile of your data, how much data it is, and what you want to achieve, there are ways to do it. I have provided a link for just to understand the different performance profile and how to increase the overall throughput performance with S3. But I'd love to get more details, and if you have a scenario, we can help you in the backend as well.
Okay, so thanks, Kumar. We might be able to take that offline further with John, perhaps. Okay, and Kumar, you've got an interesting sort of walkthrough FSX for Windows queued up ready. Is that right?
Yeah. So give me the presentation mode, and I'll let's reinforce the FSX learning. And Lily or Paul, just give me a hint that you can see my slide.
Yeah, good to
and
go.
if I switch, you can also see a Windows desktop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, no problem.
All right. Okay, so because we had several people from technology background, I'll give a bit more so you can use it later, even after this session. What I'm doing today is giving you a simple walkthrough of FSX for Windows File Server. How do we create a file system? What are the different options, which Lily has talked about, so we can learn it permanently in a way. But what I have done is I have used one of the workshop CloudFormation template to set up this FSX for Windows File Server environment. So as Lily was mentioning, right, that FSX for Windows File Server can be single AZ or multi-AZ. If you see this architecture, this is multi-AZ file system. Because it's a Windows file server, you definitely need some way of authenticating, which is through Microsoft Active Directory. So in this environment, we have Microsoft AD, which is within AWS environment. And then we have a few hosts, Windows host in particular, which I'll be using to access this file system. And as an end user, I'll be doing RDP to access my Windows instance. Now, this workshop is quite comprehensive. You can do a lot of things, including some performance tests and all of that. And at the end of this session, I have included the link, so I'll feel free to explore that. But let's go back to the FSX console, which I showed in the beginning. So this is my FSX for Windows File Server console. Let's do this. Let's create a new file system, so we'll see all the options which we have talked before. So when I click this, I get two options, right? I can either create FSX for Windows File Server file system, or I can create FSX for Lustre. FSX for Lustre is actually the file system for high performance computing, but today we'll focus on FSX for Windows File Server. So let me do next. And what I'm going to do now is just give a file system name. So maybe I had used FSX demo file system name, so I'll just use any name here. Maybe FSX demo FS02. Now, the next important thing is deployment type, right? Dilly talked about having a file system multi-AZ or single AZ. And this means that you can have different durability profile for your file system. For all the purposes for production workload, we recommend using multi-AZ file system, but in many scenarios where you want to experiment or you just need temporarily to do some tests, you can be using single AZ file system. One thing to note, when you are using single AZ file system, you see there are two different options, right? Single AZ2 and single AZ1. So single AZ1 is old one. So if I choose single AZ1, notice that I do not have HDD option. So earlier we didn't have that option. So there's no reason you would be using it now. Only when you have old file system and you probably want to do something with that, you would still be using single AZ1. Otherwise, if you're using single AZ, you will be using single AZ2. So for my purpose, let me choose a multi-AZ file system. The next important thing is a storage type, right? Whether you want to use SSD or HDD. So these two options are available. And Lily was talking about the different cost profile. And this is more or less sizing question, what kind of application you have, whether it's high performance demanding or it's more for storing long-term data and it just needs a little bit of less performance storage. So based on that, you will decide one storage type. One thing to note, if you're choosing SSD, you can go from 32 GB to 64 TB. And if you're choosing hard disk drive, the minimum capacity which you have to choose is 2 TB, maximum 64 TB. Now you might ask, what if I have a requirement of going for a petabyte scale file system? For that, you can still use DFS and combine more file system with DFS, and that way you can achieve bigger file system space. But for my purpose, let me select SSD, and I will just use maybe 2 TB file system. The next important parameter for file system is the throughput capacity, and this impacts the overall performance and the cost. So again, it's a sizing question. So when you are deciding your file system, you decided first with what will be the deployment type, what will be the storage type, and then this throughput capacity. So based on the capacity I choose, I get some recommended throughput capacity. I have a choice to go with that. Or maybe I have an application where I know I need predictable performance of, let's say, 256 Mbps. So I can choose 256 Mbps. This is just for demo, so I'll be selecting 32 Mbps, and I'm fine. Remember, this is a very important selection because it impacts overall performance, but cost as well. Now, of course, we need networking construct for FSX for Windows File Server. It resides in VPC, and it is exposed via something called ENI, Elastic Network Interface. So I've already created the VPC for this. I'll select this, and you would need a different security group as well, which will be file system security group for this. And then so remember, these, we don't put this file system in public subnet. So some of you were asking about the security construct. And I just want to reiterate that one of the important thing is, let's select private subnet 1 first here and private subnet 0. Yeah, I'm good. So one of the important philosophy or concept when you're using cloud is a shared responsibility model. So by default, hardware layer and data center is secured by AWS, but we provide you a lot of choice in terms of the configuration where you can make this secure. So for example, for file system, I would never put this file system in public subnet. So I'm putting this in private subnet. So it cannot be accessed by anyone just like that. You are very intended on who should be accessing it. So that was network. The next is Windows authentication. So as you know, for Windows file server, we need Active Directory. So we can use AWS managed Microsoft AD, but in many scenarios, you have your Windows file server and you want to use your on-premises AD server as well. So we can do that as well. So for now, I'll just use my created AD and I'm good. I could use default key for encryption, or if you have specific requirement, again, the security thing, you can have your own key and you can put that key as well. There are other aspects, auditing. You can look at all the successful or failed attempts for auditing, and you can enable that. That's again related to security and making sure that you know what's going on. You can have different DNS alias, and finally, backup and maintenance. You can enable daily automation backup. This is a demo environment, so I will just disable it. And you can choose your weekly maintenance window, which means that you can say that this file system should only be maintained from this time window to this time. I'll just say no preference, and you could put some tag as well. Okay, so I have put all the options now. I'm good with it, and I'll go ahead and create the file system. It gives me a summary of my file system name, all the options which I've selected, just for your information, displaying all of it one more time. And I'll just say create file system. So it's going to take a while. You see this file system is being created. And because we are doing it live, so it might take time. It will not be ready. So I have created a few other file systems which we could look at, and I can at least map it in a Windows server and see how it looks. So one of the important thing which you would have realized so we are talking about fully managed versus self-managed Windows file server, right? So all I needed was to give the file system name, select how much capacity I want, what kind of performance profile I want, what kind of network construct, backup option, and done. Within 10 to 15 minutes, my file system will be created. If you want to do it by yourself, even within AWS, meaning you need to create your own EC2 instance, install Windows, then configure file server, configure AD and all of that. And then if there's any patch coming, new patches coming for Windows, you have to manage. So clearly you can see that just goes away. Once the file system is created, you can, through GUI, you can look at all the information. You can even create CloudWatch alarm, and you can see some of the performance aspects. My file system is not busy, so you'll not see anything. And then you can also, so these are disabled from me, so you'll not be seeing, but backup. So for this file system, backup was enabled, so you see the backup is running continuously. So next, let's just see how similar it is as any other Windows file server in terms of managing and mapping this to Windows client. So let me go to my Windows client. So this is my Windows client. Now here, it's nothing different. You would do the exact same thing for any other Windows file server in terms of management. So why don't we just do, okay. So what I'm going to do now is we'll create a new share, and I'm doing with local Windows utility, file system management utility. So what I would be doing, I need to connect to another computer, which will be my FSX. And this is my already created file system, which was there. So I will use this. I have already kept all these for references. And yes, now I can go to this share option. And you see I have already created a few other share, but just for the purpose of demo, let's create a new share. I will create a new folder. Let's call it maybe finance. Okay, and just say next, next. And maybe I'll just give full access for now so I can do anything. And done. So you see, just using native tool, I have been able to, I'm able to create a share here. And if I have to mount or map this share, what I can do is simply going to map network drive. I gave name as finance, so I should be using this name, and done. So I'm able to create the share and mount it, and maybe let's create a file. Okay, so all done. The file system was created. I'm able to create a new share, and I'm able to map it. Now, Lily has mentioned a lot of other aspects like deduplication, compression, shadow copy, all those advanced administration. So we also give something called PowerShell endpoint with the FSX. So if I go here, let's say this file system is still creating. Let me go to the old file system. So you see here, there's one file system DNS name, but we also have Windows Remote PowerShell endpoint. So this is the endpoint which we'll be using for some of the advanced administration stuff. But I'll encourage you to go to the session, a workshop which we have for FSX for Windows File Server, so you can explore a lot of other features. Just for keeping it short and also looking at time, I'll give it back to Lily for the next topic, which is EFS.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kumar. So the demonstration there of FSX for Windows, it really does look like Windows, doesn't it?
It's absolutely Windows. So that's what I was saying. So in terms of creating a file system, we had a little bit of difference. We have AWS Console and all of that. But as soon as the file system is ready, you use it exactly same way, the way you are using. And that's why we say it fully managed Windows file server. So it's 100% Windows file server.
Yeah, good point. It just I wanted to make that point so the audience kind of gets that. Behind the scenes, we have not gone and like recreated a Microsoft Windows stack. What's behind the scenes there is Windows. It is Microsoft Windows. The difference being, though, it's fully managed by us, so you just get to consume it. You don't have to patch Windows. You don't have to worry about Windows updates. You don't have to manage and administer the servers or the infrastructure. Okay, so thank you, Kumar. So we'll move on now, and I'll just go through a little bit quicker because we've got two more topics to cover. So you may have noticed in my original opening, we have we have three file systems in AWS. You just saw FSX for Windows. And now I want to talk a little bit about our Elastic File System, EFS. So first, I just want to introduce this concept of what we in Australia say are horses for courses. You know, some race horses are particularly good on wet grass or dry grass or long courses or short courses. And you might be wondering, why have we got multiple file systems? You know, aren't file systems just file systems? So the file system that we just saw the demonstration of is FSX for Windows. And that file system is a SMB compliant, it is SMB, it is Microsoft Windows. And obviously that file system service is designed for any of your Microsoft Windows workloads or any SMB workloads. The other file system that we have that I'm just going to talk to you about briefly now is our Amazon Elastic File System. Elastic File System, or EFS for short, is designed for Linux workloads or container-based workloads. And it's a file system that's based upon NFS 4.1. Okay, so if we have a look at our next slide, I want to introduce to you the concept of modern applications. What's this concept and this term, modern application? So all of us, the 50 or so % of us on the call, the webinar at the moment, we would be very comfortable with the concept of physical machines in that left-hand corner. I'm also willing to bet we're going to be very confident and comfortable with virtual machines, whether it's VMware, whether it's a Windows hypervisor or some other hypervisor. Virtual machines and physical machines, we're very comfortable with that construct. Many times today, we're seeing customers and software vendors re-architect their application into containers, which is a packaging of the application in a portable format, just like a container is for rail, for freight, for transporting products around the world. The concept of a container in IT speak is a mechanism for packaging an application so as it's easier to launch and to shut down, easier for it to be more portable, and easier for it to sort of run in different environments. Increasingly, we're seeing the concept of serverless come up as well. And serverless is all about functions. It's all about something that's much smaller than a container. So it's a small function, a single purpose function. In C programming terms, you might be familiar with the function printf. Printf is a function to output some text to a device. So this concept of serverless and functions is increasingly the direction that application vendors and customers are taking to re-architect their application. So if we move on to our next slide, why are they doing this? Why are customers modernizing applications using containers and this concept of functions or serverless? First and foremost, it's about cost reduction. Coming back to that optimization that we talked about earlier, you can save substantial amounts of money, particularly in a public cloud construct, by only paying for what you consume. Now, when it comes to compute, if you pay by the server, that can be very expensive. If you pay by the virtual machine, that can be less expensive. But if you only pay for the CPU seconds that you consume when a function starts and wakes up, processes some data, and then shuts down, that's very, very optimal, very cost optimized. The other aspect of containers and server functions in serverless, it allows us to iterate. It allows us to develop and deploy code much quicker than perhaps a normal, traditional, monolithic software application stack. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see very, very briefly, what does this look like in an Amazon Web Services construct? What you'll notice here is that we have at the top of the slide, we have some EC2 instances, we have a container environment that's known as ECS, Elastic Container Services, EKS, and Fargate for supporting different constructs of your container ecosystem. And we have a service called AWS Lambda. Lambda is our serverless construct for supporting those functions that start up, process a little bit of data, and then shut down. And you only pay for that short period of time that the function is actually executing. Down the bottom of the slide, you'll see a file system. A file system is required to maintain state, to persist state between the container startup shutdown, between the function startup shutdown, maybe to pass data back to another instance or another container. So the concept of this file system is required to make this architecture work. If we move on to our next slide, we'll see the construct that we typically use for that container environment or that serverless Lambda function environment is the Amazon Elastic File System. It's a cloud-native, fully scalable, elastic file system that can shrink and grow. It has supreme durability, similar to what we talked about earlier with S3. And most importantly, it's a cost-optimized file system. One of the unique aspects of EFS that really differentiates it, particularly from FSX for Windows, is the concept of intelligent tiering, automatically shuffling and life-cycling infrequently accessed files off to a cheaper tier of storage. If we move on to our next slide, we'll just see some common use cases, common containerized applications that require this concept of persistent storage, stateful storage to support long-running stateful applications, as well as applications that just start and stop and have to, shuffle some data back, perhaps for the next time when the application is run. So we have developer tools, developer environments. We have web content management platforms, for example, WordPress. WordPress would not be able to exist without the construct, the like of an elastic file system, for example. Many of our machine learning, artificial intelligence applications also require this sort of persistent file system. So moving on now, just to have a look quickly at what it costs. Looking at the Singapore region here, we see that, effectively EFS can cost us between 5 to roughly 10 cents per month. 5 to 10 cents a month. 5 cents a month roughly if we use the one zone, just the one copy of the file system in one zone, or if we use EFS standard, which is where the files, the data is replicated to multiple zones, it's roughly 9.4, less than 9.5 cents a month effectively. What does effective mean? Effectively means that we're storing roughly 20% of our data in that top tier and 80% of our data in that less frequently accessed tier, which is a cheaper tier of storage. Moving on to the next slide, we can see what would it take if we were to build such a file system ourselves. So one of the concepts we've talked about today is the concept of a managed file system. What does managed file system mean? What we're doing here at Amazon is we're managing all the infrastructure behind the scenes that supports the file system. So for you to build your own EFS-like file system based upon traditional NFS, you would require multiple EC2 instances. You would require storage volumes. You would require replication capability between availability zones, for example. And if we look at our next slide, we can see at what this would cost as an example, relatively the do-it-yourself approach versus the fully managed approach. And just using example pricing from US North Virginia, you get like $459 a month to do it yourself versus like $44 a month if you use the managed service. So it's almost like a no-brainer. And that same relativity applies in the Singapore region. So if we move on to our next slide, we'll just take a very quick look at Zalora. Zalora is a very popular, well-known fashion outlet on the web. They offer a whole range of clothes for your wardrobe, for your whole family, in fact, based out of Singapore here. And they run their entire web presence, and in particular, their SAP infrastructure on AWS. Underpinning that SAP infrastructure on AWS is an Amazon Elastic file system. It provides them with the capability they need to be able to scale their business on demand for popular shopping days, to maintain costs efficiently, to keep things under, at a manageable, optimized cost level, as well as giving them all the security and peace of mind they require for a very popular web-based e-commerce solution, which is their business. They're absolutely trusting AWS to support them, to support their business. So that's just a very quick introduction to EFS. And if we just come back now with Lily, let's just take a quick check if we've got any questions before we go back to Kumar for our final little demonstration walkthrough. Any new questions, Lily?
Nope, I don't see any additional questions since our last section. So I think we covered pretty much well in the common questions around hybrid as well as the data protection side. Just one question I have, Paul, is if you can elaborate a little bit more on the lifecycle management of EFS, whether that helps, how much of that can be automated, as well as can it also support the reverse from an infrequent access to the standard tier as well? So how much of convenience can it actually bring?
Right, good question. And so what I talked about very briefly there, you saw in that cost example slide, was the concept of lifecycle management within EFS. If you turn on that policy, then what you have access to is the fully managed features of EFS will fully manage on your behalf, monitoring how actively files are accessed. And based on your policies, you're able to automatically have the EFS software migrate files from that standard tier or that frequently accessed tier, which is a more expensive tier, into the less frequently accessed tier. Typically here we find most customers follow the 80-20 rule. 20% of their data is accessed frequently, 80% is not accessed frequently, and that 80% of the data of the files can sit in that lower cost access tier. You don't notice or see any difference from the NFS mount point of view, the file system interface on your client. You cannot tell, you don't see any difference. You open a file, the file is just opened, and then it comes back to the standard tier when it's been accessed and updated. So there's honestly, very little additional, apart from turning on the policy, maybe adjusting some of the policy parameters. There's nothing else for you to worry about or administer with that lifecycle management behind the scenes in EFS.
Thanks, Paul.
That's very seamless and very managed.
There is one additional question, but I think we can take it offline since the question is about isn't it more complex to develop a serverless or containers based application? It's an interesting one, but I want to focus on I'm a bit cautious with time, so I would like to hand over to Kuma for a quick overview of EFS itself, and then I think we can hand over to Value Line.
Okay, yeah, over to you, Kumar. And I can see your screen, Kumar, you're good to go.
Am I audible now? Sorry, I was on mute still.
Okay. Am
I audible now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Off you go.
Okay, let's take a quick sneak peek on EFS and some of the concepts which Paul has mentioned. I have some existing file system created, and the reason is I wanted to mount durability. We talked about one zone or regional file system. So when you are saying regional, every file which is stored, it's cascaded across 3 or more AZ. But you can go for one zone file system as well. There can be many reasons, maybe for test or for some temporary purpose, or maybe this is already a secondary copy of data. That's why you are using it. So that's when you can choose one zone. And when you do one zone, then you can also mention availability zone, the zone which you want to select. But I'll keep it regional. The second important parameter is choosing backup. So as Lily and Paul mentioned, that either EFS or FSX for Windows file server can be backed up using AWS backup. So all you need to do is just to enable this automatic backup. And this is a daily backup retained for 35 days. So you can either enable these or configure it by your own. So this is for demo purpose. I'm just going to disable it. Lifecycle management, which Paul was talking just a while ago. So we can configure it that if the file is not accessed for last 7 days up to 90 days, we can choose any of these options, and based on that, it'll move to the lower cost tier. But I'll just choose none because this is my demo file system. Performance mode, choose general purpose for majority of the use cases, okay? But only in the specific use case where you have many clients and you want to get higher aggregated throughput, GBPS, that's when you should be selecting max IO or general purpose. And remember, choosing between these two does not impact your cost. It's just a different performance profile of your application because it's a shared file system. But then we have something called throughput mode, where based on what you choose will impact your cost. Bursting by default, meaning based on the file system size. And remember, you don't choose file system size in EFS. This depends on how much data you store. So depending on how much data you store and the growth, you will get performance increased if you have more data. But if you want a very predictable performance, your application is demanding and you know what you need, then you can also choose provision. And then per file system, you can go up to 1024 megabyte per second. But I'll keep it bursting. And then let's go next. The next important thing is to choose the network from where this file system can be accessed. So I already have created VPC for this. It should be EFS workshop. And because I have already created 2 subnets, so that's why it's giving 2 subnets. But remember, this file system is cascaded across all availability zone. So right now, I'll private subnet 1 and private subnet 1 and private subnet 0. And the last thing, I'll be choosing a security group so it can interact with the client which I want. So this is the security group. If these are new thing for you, don't bother. It'll come easily once you see it later. But these are mount targets, and I will just say next. The other thing, like for NFS, you might be aware that there are security construct. You give client-based access, but within AWS, we have several ways of restricting this access. We call it IAM and via access policy, and also access points. I'll reserve that for some time later, but that's a very powerful tool to give one more construct for security. For now, I'll just go ahead and go to next, and this is my file system review, and I'll leave everything.
Hey, Kumar, we might need to just accelerate the demo a little bit to make sure we just give value line time to for their section.
So you know what? I'm done. The file system is created, and this is my Linux instance, and I've already created file system. I'm just mounting it, and df-edge, the file system is there. There's a lot to discuss about EFS, but I hope this gives you a good idea of how to create a file system and mount it on NFS. Maybe take back my presentation mode, and by the time value line comes in, I'll explain a few things. For example, EFS is NFS-based file system, but we have very tight integration with other services like EKS and ECS and Lambda, and that's where what Paul was saying, that you can easily give this file system access for all the modern application. With that, yeah, really being mindful of other time, I'll hand it over to Value Line.
Okay, thanks, Kumar. And Mia, back to yourself. And yeah, that demo, at least you definitely see the difference between like the Windows environment, FSX for Windows, and the EFS environment there, you know, targeting the NFS Linux file systems. Okay, so Mia, over to you to take us through to completion. Lowell, over to you.
Hello. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much again for attending this session. And also, I would like to thank the AWS team for giving us the opportunity to be part of this session. So I hope everyone is doing fine. And I would like to introduce myself. I'm Mark Lowell Satin from VBusiness Software and Solutions, Inc. So I would like to open my cam first. Okay. And so let's start. Okay. Let's start first with a short background of Value Line and its group of companies. So, having a trouble with this presentation. Okay. Sorry. Oops. How is it? Okay. I'm having a bit trouble with my presentation. I think there's a problem in my presentation. It's me. Okay, so let's start first with a short background of our Value Line and group of companies. So our mother company is Value Line System and Solutions Corp, that was started way back 2000 as an IBM business partner. And along with the emerging shift of technology, we became one of the pioneer users of Amazon Cloud and now an advanced consulting partner of AWS here in the Philippines. I would like to share you presentation, but seems like there's a little bit of problem in my machine, and I don't know.
Okay, since we're experiencing some technical difficulty, Lowell, I will take over your screen for a bit.
Okay,
Let me
sure.
just pull up your slide, but you can continue talking. You can, and
Okay.
I will catch up with the screen now, all right? All right,
Okay,
sorry everyone
for
that. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, so let me continue. No, as I said earlier, Value Line System and Solutions Corp was started way back 2000 as an IBM business partner, and along with the emerging shift of technology, we became one of the pioneer user of Amazon Cloud, and now an advanced consulting partner of AWS here in the Philippines. So, with the 20 years of expertise, Value Line produced 3 more companies under her name to deliver more solutions in the market. These are the spin-off companies under Value Line. First, we have the VBusiness Software and Solutions, Inc., which more focus on delivering cloud solutions powered by AWS. Second, we have the Strict Lab Solutions, which focuses on business innovations and implementations of services on AWS and expertise on website and application development on cloud platform, which consists mostly of certified solutions architect, DevOps engineer, developers and programmers, project managers, and the QA team. Third, we have the B1G2 Technologies, Inc., which is an exclusive distributor of ESET here in the Philippines. So I would like also to present some of our services once Ms. Mia present my presentation on the screen. Okay. So Value Line is also a ISO certified for both 9001 for the quality management system and an ISO 27001 for the information security management. Okay, and okay, I think We are on the next slide, Miss Mia. Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Miss Mia. Okay, once again, VBusiness is a new spin-off company under Value Line, and we are now an advanced consulting partner of AWS for both commercial and public sector here in the Philippines, and we are also an immersion day and a solution provider partner of AWS. So here are the services. Next in line, we have the services of VBusiness that can help you and assist you on your cloud journey. Next slide, please, Ms. Mia. Okay, thank you. First, from the left, we have the cloud consulting. We seek to understand the company's business and technology goals, and then from there, we provide appropriate designs, infra, and application discovery in order to improve company's efficiency and help to reach company's goal. Aside from cloud consulting, we also have the migration and deployment, as you can see. We will help you move your workloads to AWS Cloud platform, such as SAP, the ERP application, all application workloads you are using for your customers or for the benefits of your company. We also provide cloud security, like ESET, cloud security, like ESET and standards and best practices to help you add more security or secure your application or your workloads while running on clouds. We also provide managed service for the infrastructure and cost management. With this, we will provide you a proactive monitoring and reports to the customer. We also have the DevOps. So the DevOps is basically a combination of development engineer and IT operations. The goal for this is to automate the manual tasks or the traditional tasks. We have here also the website development and application development, which will be all running on AWS platforms such as contact tracing application, which is a must for nowadays due to the pandemic or due to the COVID pandemic. Also, we also have the backup and storage such as archiving, disaster recovery, and file storage. And in line with that, we also have the end user computing, which will help you access your resources and enjoy the benefit on working at home on multiple devices from anywhere and anytime. Example of these are the workspaces, the app streams, and the work docs. Machine learning and AI, also we provide that solutions. Artificial intelligence such as chatbot, data analytics, and extract. Okay, next. For the next line, next in line, I would like to show the applications that we have developed and running on AWS Cloud platform. First of all, we have the ExaCloud CRM, which can be used for monitoring of sales and inventory. And we also have the Yespo chatbot. This actually can help companies to answer queries of their customers. Of course, we encountered problems interacting with our clients. So Yespo chatbot, we will automate the conversation in the interaction with the people and with your clients. Care information system, we also offer the solution or the system because it aims to manage the patient information such as medical records, inventory, sales, and transactions. We also have Sunrise Media. This is a streaming platform which can be run 24/7, and you can access this application via TV or mobile. Next, we have the chatbot. As I said earlier, for the chatbot, the solutions for your online communication with your client, prospects, and for FAQ, inquiry, or for quotation. We also have, Ms. Mia, next slide. Thank you. Okay, next we also have the web hosting. So web hosting, we are all familiar with the web and application hosting. We will build a secure facility for your workloads. We will build secure equipment like WAF, antivirus, SSL, and other security tools to prevent from hackers, especially if your website has an online transaction or payment. We also have the contactless health declaration. This An example is a contact tracing, as I said earlier, which is now a must these days. Some companies implementing this for safety purposes and less physical interaction with the people. We also have an e-commerce solution, which is a solution we offer that if you need to create your company website with online transaction. For example, we have this case with the Lazada, with the Shopee. If you want that kind of style of transaction, we will customize your website. We also have VBusiness solutions offering through partners. For example, we have the ESET Security or then NOD32. They provide protection for your everyday online activities for home and business devices. We also have the SAP B1 or the SAP HANA for the application which aims to automate end-to-end process. And we also have the Cisco, a partner of VBusiness that offers solution expertise in networking and security. Thank you. Ms. Mia, next slide, please. Okay, next. Okay, next slide, Ms. Mia. Thank you. Okay. After this, this will be the question on how can we help you and what will you do next if you want to enjoy all the benefits of cloud technology. Okay, you can start your file migration journey with VBusiness. We will help you plan, to segregate all, and to implement all the projects or all your workloads. We will migrate. We'll help you migrate all your workloads on AWS Cloud platform. So we need you to book a free and one-on-one consultation with us, and we will conduct a POC testing. And after all of this, we're good to proceed with the implementation of the project. And of course, for these hard times, we will, we also have a program with AWS. We want to help the SMB to migrate easily in cloud platform by giving them a free 1 month worth of usage, which is valid until December 2021. Okay, thank you. Next. So as you can see on the screen, so here are some of our happy customers. We have the Unilab, the MGHI Group, the PNG, the ESET, Tobis, Maybank, and many more. Okay, so once again, thank you very much. So that ends my presentation, and I hope you learn a lot from what I have discussed. And if you want to know more about VBusiness, you can visit our Facebook page or our website, or you can directly email me at mark.lazatin@vbusiness.ph. Again, I'm Lowell from the new customer segment team. Thank you very much again for attending this session and this webinar. And I'm giving back the floor to Ms. Mia. Ms. Mia, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Lowell, for that very informative presentation and really a good introduction and ending to our informative session for today. Okay, so I think, all right, so we have 2 minutes. So I think what we can do right now is, hold on, let me just stop showing the screen for a while. Maybe I can call back to the floor our speakers from earlier to give their final thoughts and final, like a final word for all of our attendees today. All right.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mia. And thank you to all, let me see, 55 of you that have stayed for the 2 hours. Thank you very much for listening to us and asking those questions. I think we've answered all the questions. There was one small section that we ran out of time for, and that was on some data transfer tools, transferring data in and out of the cloud. This session will be followed up with a thank you email, and that email will have a link for you to be able to access the slides from the webinar, and you'll see that data transfer section, as well as Lily, there's some learning resources as well in that slide deck. Just want to mention quickly a little bit about those.
Yeah, I can quickly mention that all the demo which, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so all the demo which we were going through, I have just found out few workshops which can be very useful. All you need is an AWS account, and there's a CloudFormation template, different modules. So we have given learning resources for FSX for Windows File Server, EFS, and data sync, and some use case like MS SQL, high availability. So go through that, and if there's any question, you can reach us.
Great. Thank you for those demos. Lily, any final thoughts from yourself? What to do next?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for staying with us. What I would ask from you is we will follow up with each and every of your questions. I think there were some asks for resources, so we will hand over some of the demo videos as well as the workshop guides that you can actually get your hands dirty, like Kumar mentioned. And just engage with us early stage. You can reach out to Lowell, or you can reach out to us if you have any questions, concerns, or opportunities that you want to discuss to optimize or build. We are here. I think the earlier we are open about this discussion, the better it's for all of us. So yeah, we hoped you're not a stranger after this session. Please keep in touch.
All right, thank you. Thank you to Paul, Kumar, and Lily, and the VBusiness team, Crystal and Lowell. All right, so guys, before we end the session formally, I would like to ask you a few questions just to get your feedback about the webinar that you've just had. Okay, so let me just quickly launch this poll. All right, so how would you rate our webinar for today? 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. So, we really appreciate the feedback that we get from you guys. And we like to conduct our polls live so that, we have you while we still have you, so that you don't have to go to another screen to answer a separate survey. All right. Okay, so I think a majority of you have already voted. So let me just close that very quickly. All right. And second question, how would you rate our speakers for today? 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. You can select one of the following, all right? Okay, I think I'll give you guys about 15 seconds more. I know you guys are probably hungry. It's lunchtime. So thank you so much for your patience that we're extending just for a few minutes. All right. Okay, I see that a majority have also voted already. Okay. Last two, how would you rate the relevance of the topic for today? 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. Okay, so I see some votes still coming in. Let me give you 10 more seconds to turn your attention to the GoToWebinar screen. All right. And last but not the least, do you have plans of deploying any workloads to the cloud? Yes, in the next 0 to 6 months. Yes, in the next 7 to 11 months. Yes, in 12 months or more. Or no, we don't have any projects yet. Okay, so last 10 seconds. Okay, oh, I see some votes still coming in. All right, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, I think that's about the majority of our audience. All right, thank you. Okay, so I will let everyone have a good lunch. Thank you again to our AWS team, Sir Paul, Kumar, Lily, and Lowell for giving us your time for this morning session. And I hope everyone in the audience has learned about how to accelerate and about the file storage options of AWS and how that will help in your migration journey. So have a good lunch, everyone, and take care and stay safe. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank
Bye now.
you. Have a great lunch.
Thank you, everyone.